Hello and welcome to Resource Efficiency for Businesses, a three-part online training series that begins with today's webinar, The Business Case for Resource Efficiency. I'm Stephanie Widorini from the GGKP, the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership, a global network of organizations and experts dedicated to providing the policy, business, and finance communities with knowledge, guidance, data, and tools to transition to an inclusive green economy. Visit our three web platforms to learn more: greenindustryplatform.org, greenfinanceplatform.org, and ggkp.org. For those that are unfamiliar, the partnership was established in 2012 and is led by the Global Green Growth Institute, the OECD, United Nations Environment Programme, UNIDO, and the World Bank. The Resource Efficiency for Businesses online training series is offered by our partner GIZ, the German Corporation for International Cooperation, and the VDI Competence Centre for Resource Efficiency, which is also known as VDI. Today's session will focus on the basics. What is resource efficiency, why resource efficiency matters for the climate, and why it makes business sense to become more resource efficient. It will be led by Manuel Weber, an industrial engineer and scientific officer at VDI. And before we get started, I'd like to encourage all of you to raise questions throughout the webinar through the question box in the webinar control panel. It's a great opportunity to engage directly with Manuel and others. After the webinar, we'd appreciate if you could take 5 minutes to complete our survey on a webinar. Your feedback is very valuable to us and will help us shape our future webinars. And if you have any technical issue, you can email us at contact@ggkp.org, and we will surely help you troubleshoot. Finally, please note that a full recording of today's webinar, including the presentation, will be available at ggkp.org shortly after the webinar. Join us at the same time next week for the second session in this series, the Resource Efficiency Roadmap for Businesses. We'll look at the first steps companies can take to become more resource efficient, how they can identify the resource efficiency measures most suitable for their business, and how they can assess their production sites to see where there is room for improvement. Without further ado, I am delighted to welcome our resource efficiency expert, Manuel Weber, to begin his presentation.
Thanks a lot, Stephanie, for your introduction and the background of the work of GGKP. I also want to welcome all participants for this first webinar of the online training series, Resource Efficiency for Businesses. I would also like to thank you, the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership, for the opportunity to conduct this training today and in the coming weeks on this platform. Some words from my side. Now, for more than 6 years, I've been involved in the development of various tools and services of the VDI Center for Resource Efficiency, and I have been part in several various international projects regarding resource efficiency and sustainable development. First of all, I would like some introduction words about the work of VDI Center for Resource Efficiency and what is our aim and work regarding this center, a competence center of resource efficiency. The VDI Center for Resource Efficiency is carried out on behalf of the Federal Ministry of Environment in Germany. And the main task of the center is to prepare and provide knowledge and information in the whole field of operational resource efficiency, especially for small and medium enterprises, in a practical way. The aim is to provide companies with especially technical information and helping them to implementing resource efficiency measure in their own companies. Through the connection to the Association of German Engineers, which is an institution for standardization here in Germany. Some of the guidelines of resource efficiency are also developed and published. Some of the guidelines are still currently under preparation. On the next slide, you can see a small selection of tools and services the VDI Center for Resource Efficiency is offering to the company, so to the interests. And in addition to qualification courses and development of guidelines, as I already mentioned, most of the tools and services the center is offering are online or can be downloaded from the website. A specific online tool such as resource checks or a cost calculator or process chains can support the companies with concrete solutions and approaches to implement resource efficiency in their own company. In addition, VDI Center for Resource Efficiency publishes a series of studies and short studies that analyze the recent trends and developments in specific areas of resource efficiency in detail. This webinar was developed within the framework of the Initiative for Resource Efficiency and Climate Protection, and was derived from a 3-day qualification course. The initiative is implemented under the leadership of the GIZ. The main aim of the initiative is the sustainable management of resources, and through this, the reduction of greenhouse gas resulting from the consumption of resources. In concrete terms, this includes raising awareness about existing potentials and strengthening national and international dialogues, as well as supporting international networks and cooperation and contributing to them. Also to strengthen the capacity of key stakeholders, as well as providing consultancy for identifying and tapping of potentials and enhanced resource efficiency and climate protection. The major focus of this initiative is emerging economies. What are the main topics that we address in the online series? So this first webinar today will focus on more methodical principles and motivation for resource efficiency in small and medium enterprises. And in a more interactive discussion, we want to discuss about drivers and barriers for resource efficiency that companies have to deal with. The second webinar next week will more focus on a roadmap, how to implement resource efficiency strategies in practice in the companies. In the next week interactive discussion, we want to have a look to the role of the employees before and during this implementation process. The third webinar is more focused on strategies and measures, and especially real-world experience. So in this session, we will have a look to different product and process-related strategies that can be rolled out during an implementation process, and also show some good practice examples in detail. In the third interactive discussion, we will focus on the topic digitalization and Industry 4.0 technologies and how they can increase resource efficiency. When we have a look to the agenda for today, as I mentioned in the first, we will look at basic terms and definitions of resource efficiency. In the second part, we will have a look to the motivation of companies, why they should become more resource efficiency in the first place. In the third parts today webinar, I would like to discuss with you the challenges of companies facing implementing resource efficiency in in their companies. Next slide, please. The term resources is defined differently in different contexts. In the context of resource efficiency, resources stand for natural resources. So what are natural resources? First of all, and especially for the business environment, material, energy, and water are the main resources that can be understood as natural resources. In addition, air and surface or soil and so-called ecosystem services are also defined as natural resources. The ecosystem service include, for example, the sync function of the nature or the biodiversity. But as I mentioned, for businesses, these three resources: raw materials, energy, and water are the main focus. And they have to look on. Next, please. As you probably all know, the global demand for natural resources is constantly increasing. There are some reasons for this. First of all, the rising population, but also the urbanization and the expansion of industrial and service-related production leads to an increase of resource demand. Especially in emerging markets, the rising or at least average income will also feed the increasing of resource demand of natural resources. In the graph on the next slide, on this slide, I just want to illustrate an example how the increasing resource demand in the example of using plastic is increasing. In particular, the fact that in the years after 2000, more than half of the all plastic ever produced shows this almost exploding demand. But how can nations exactly react on increasing demand of raw materials? So if at all there's a possibility, option A could be increase the exploitation of the domestic resources. But in most of the cases, this is not a very helpful strategy. Option B could be to increase the amount of imported raw materials. Next. But this also leads not to a sustainable development. Or option 3, the increased resource efficiency. This option is at least an option that ensure a sustainable development for nations or countries. In other words, the aim should be to decouple economic growth from resource consumption. If we have a look on the next slide, there you see a graph with the indicator of total raw material productivity that can be used to calculate the decoupling of economic growth from the resource use. It is calculated from the use of primary raw materials in gross domestic product and import. And the graph shows the development of the raw materials productivity in Germany in the recent years. The development shows the trend, at least in the recent years, is moving to the right direction. You see that the demand of raw materials is going slightly back. And still the gross domestic product is growing. So this means that the blue line, the raw material productivity is increasing as well. What does resource efficiency mean in concrete terms? In simple terms, you might say the less energy and material used, the better. But as I mentioned before, the VDI is also contributing to development guideline for resource efficiency. And in the guideline 4800 part 1, the definition of resource efficiency was laid down. So resource efficiency is defined as the ratio between a certain benefit and the resource use required for it. And an increase of resource efficiency will be obtained if certain benefit in goods or products can be achieved with less or use with less use of natural resources. The following diagram illustrates a little bit more this definition. So we have on the counter above the benefit, which can be actually a product or a so-called functional unit. This functional unit describes the benefit in a solution independent from the product. For example, in the case of mobility, a functional unit could be the transportation from A to B, but it's not defined that this has to be happened with a certain product. So it can be realized with cars or bus or planes. So there you see this options how the solution or the resource efficient solution can be realized is more open than just to look at the product. The need or effort, as I mentioned before, are mainly the raw materials that are used and the energy resources that are consumed, and the third resource, water. And okay, yeah. As I said, okay, benefit would be in a simple term the product or this functional unit. In the last times, the term circular economy has become more and more widespread, so especially in Europe. Therefore, I would like to introduce you briefly the difference between this definitions of resource efficiency and circular economy. Again, in simple words, circular economy could be described as don't use and throw away, keep materials in the loop so they can stay in the use for as long as possible. Compared to the simple definition of resource efficiency, the less energy and material used, the better. What both approaches have in common is that the entire life cycle have to be taken into account when a product or a service is considered. For completeness, you will also find on the next slide the whole definition of the circular economy. In summary, the difference that can be made between these two approaches, the circular economy focuses mainly on keeping the material in the cycle, while resource efficiency approach is more using less material as possible, and so not put it directly into this cycle of keep it in a circular economy. Okay, we already went through the first part, so I don't know if there are already questions regarding this first part. I guess not. So maybe we some. Okay, there's a question of if I can give some examples of companies that can become resource efficient. I later on my presentation will show some of these examples. So maybe this has become a little bit more clear then. So if there are not any further questions so far, I would go on. And as promised, we now want to talk about a little bit the motivation for companies, why they should put effort on become more resource efficient and their business strategy. And as I promised, I would also show some examples of companies that have already implemented resource efficiency in their business. The following graph shows the cost structure of the manufacturing industry in Germany. So this data is annually collected by the Federal Statistical Office. And here you can see that the largest share of costs, just under 42%, is spent on materials. Compared to the energy cost, which is less than 2%, this share of material is one of the most important possibilities to increase the material efficiency and therefore reduce the costs. Next slide, please. When we have a look to this slide in simple terms, what does it mean? Why they should increase resource efficiency in their business? Well, less material and energy that is used in the production means also lower costs, and these lower costs on the one hand leads to higher profit, but also to a higher competitiveness of the company. The increase of profit that otherwise would be achieved by increasing the turnover. In some cases, it's possibly easier to achieve a reducing of resources in the production. So that's an easier way to increase the profit. And we have have a look to other advantages for businesses, why they should become more resource efficient. There are lower production costs, which may be also passed to customers. So therefore, it can increase again the competitiveness on the market. Furthermore, there may be less dependence on the raw material market. In some cases, the dependency of companies of raw material markets is quite huge. If the resource efficiency is improved in a product, lower costs can also be realized in the customer's utilization phase. This means if you build a resource efficiency product that consuming less resources, especially energy or material during the use phase, then you also have an advantage for your customers. Resource efficient production and products can but also contribute to a positive corporate image. So if you communicate that your production or your product is more resource efficiency than others on the market, you improve your communication and your image. On this slide, we want to have a short look what German companies or SMEs think about resource efficiency. This are the results of a survey that has been conducted by the VDI Center for Resource Efficiency. And only 27% stated that their industry is already resource efficient. This shows that there's still considerable potential for resource efficiency increase. So even if they have been asked if there's a possibility to increase, they say the most of them say yes, there are still potentials to raise the the resource efficiency. About 76% stated that resource efficiency is already part of their corporate strategy. 60% stated that resource efficiency is of great importance also for their customers. And 67% stated that resource efficiency is being discussed in the industry. These three numbers, so around about 60 or even more percent of the asked company, shows that resource efficiency is becoming more and more relevant for their businesses and for their strategies. Not least, this increasing relevance is due to the possibility of realizing greenhouse gas, reducing greenhouse gas emissions by saving material and energy, and therefore contributing to the climate protection. For example, in the program for research funding, it's called R squared, which is focused on, or was focused on innovative technologies for resource efficiency in resource intensive production processes. Theoretical saving was calculated, and they came to the conclusion that if these technologies only in Germany would be implemented all across the industries, 80 million tons of material, 75 terawatt hours of energy, and through 60 million tons of CO2 emissions could be saved per year. So even if this is only a theoretical potential of this program, it illustrates that the possibilities for saving resources are enormous. In the following, I would show you some examples of companies that should show you how many possibilities for saving resources there are. In the first example, it's focused on the packaging sector. So you're probably all familiar with this shrink film that is used to hold PET bottles together in packs. So over 1 million tons of this film is used worldwide for packaging these PET bottles. From the point of resource use, they are only used. This film is only used to make the transport easier of this bottle, but they have no deeper reason. They just are disposed after this transportation. A German manufacturer of packaging machines has therefore developed a process in which only a thin plastic band is used for carrying, for holding these bottles together. When we have a look to the next slide, please. So there you can see on the picture that's only a thin plastic sleeve that holds the bottle together and with a handle. Compared to the whole shrink foil that is used in the traditional way. So with this technology, it is possible to save 75% of material, especially this plastic foil, and over this 95% of energy, because the energy that is used to shrink this foil isn't needed anymore. Additional values are this technology is economically economic advantage, and also faster in the production process. And also this technology can be transferred to other packaging process. Another example of how resource efficiency can be implemented is what is known as a product service system. This means it's not the product itself that is sold or purchased, but it's the service the company is providing. An example of this is the chemical leasing. Traditionally, this interest of supplier and customers are different. So in the traditional way, the supplier want to sell as much material as possible, and the customer want to buy as less material as possible. When we have a look to a leasing system, then the interests of supplier and customer are coming together to the same interest. So then now also the supplier tries to sell as little material as possible. That's because they don't sell the chemicals itself. When we look to an example for a cleaning process, they don't sell the chemical for cleaning. They sell the quantity. They sell they sell the service per cleaning each company or area that is cleaned and invoiced. So the supplier also has the interest to reduce the use of chemical for this cleaning process. From the point of view of resource consumption, this is also positive because the aim is to operate the process as efficient as possible. And if you just customer and buy your chemicals, you're not always focusing on improving the processes and the cleaning process, but the supplier of the service exactly know what the chemical or the product is used for, and how they can use it efficiently, and therefore the resource consumption is reduced. On this slide, I only want to give an overview about other ways of resource efficiency, especially in the building infrastructure. So there are various possibilities, especially for saving energies. So this can be realized, for example, by using energy efficient lighting, or an efficient cooling or air conditioning system, as well as an efficient heating technology. Another thing is the insulation of the building envelope that can reduce this resource consumption regarding the energy. In a lot of cases, the rainwater is not used for saving water. So there's also quite huge potential for different processes or areas that can be used for this one. As I mentioned, I just want to give an overview of different possibilities, how the building infrastructure and energy efficient buildings can be realized, and therefore lead to a resource reduction in this area. On this slide, I will show you only a brief example of a company that have saved energy by using solar energy in their painting process. So they installed vacuum tube collectors that generate the solar heat and distribute them and store them in intelligent heat distributors and storage tanks. So for the coating and drying process, they need hot air or warm air. So the whole systems generate the hot air by with a water air heat exchanger. And an additional measure, what they have realized is a rotary heat exchanger that recover the energy from the exhaust air. The company that realized this solar energy use it was possible to save 32% of the energy compared to the original process. The heat recovery system enabled another 20% of energy saving. So this example will show you only briefly how the own generation of solar or energy can reduce the resource of consumption and help to increase the resource efficiency. You have mainly seen on the slides that these examples are referred to the web video magazine from the VDI Center for Resource Efficiency. There you can find some of these examples in details as short video sequences. So in this presentation, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of these measures. Also in the third webinar, we will go more into detail about exciting examples, and there you will learn some more about practical implementation of resource efficiency. Okay, just go quickly. Through some question. Okay, there are quite a lot of questions. I just go through it quickly. I guess I can't answer all of them, but I try to. There was Nora Berg asking what chemical leasing this exactly means. So maybe just to wrap up again what I've presented before. So the idea is not to selling the chemical itself, but to sell the service of a process. So as I mentioned, for example, for a cleaning process, you need several chemicals. and if you're a supplier of chemicals, you're probably used to sell your chemicals for different companies, and so you don't have an idea what's going to happen with these chemicals. But if you cooperate with your customer as a supplier, you can have a look to the process, in this case in the cleaning process, where the chemical is used for cleaning, and then develop with your customer a best available process to clean your parts, and therefore the supplier will sell a leasing, and this for the chemicals for the cleaning process, as I mentioned, which is paid for the area of cleaned of cleaned parts or something like this. Hopefully this makes it a little bit clearer. There wasn't comment if plastic water bottles can ever be considered resource efficient. Well, I guess that's a very difficult question, because some of the producers say that the plastic bottles are less heavy than other bottles, and therefore the transportation is more resource efficient. But well, to be honest, this question is not easy to answer. But my example, what I presented today, is just to consider the process of this packaging. So where the shrink foil could be reduced, and therefore saved quite a lot of material and energy. Well, there might be a better solution than the use of plastic bottles at all, but I guess this have to be calculated and compared on the other side. I guess if the circle is closed, so that all the plastic can be kept in cycles and recycled again and used again, so it might be an additional option. Well, I see there are quite a lot of questions regarding this two approaches, resource efficiency and circular economy. There are also some questions how governments can promote resource efficiency. So maybe I can try to answer, or just give an idea what is possible. So, for example, for us in Germany, our Center for Resource Efficiency try to promote as much as we can different technologies about resource efficiency. So I guess this can be an approach to improve resource efficiency, and also um, um, the thinking about it. So our experiences as more showcases we give how even with small invests or with small steps companies can improve their resource efficiency. This means reduce material consumption or energy consumption. The more companies get an interest on it. So from my perspective, I guess governments should promote this resource efficiency approach in the first place, but also help them for implementing this. So we in Germany we have several funding programs. That are also directly linked to resource efficiency. So there are some investment programs that help to implement new technologies on a wider field. Yeah, I guess on this case. So on the one hand is promoting resource efficiency and the possibilities how to improve this, but also to help investing, especially small and medium companies, in efficient technologies. There was also a question about how SMEs in Germany implement resource efficiency regarding this implementation cost. So as I mentioned, there are some funding programs, but I guess if their return on invest is very high, and they want to improve their resource efficiency by their own, they gonna find a way to finance it on the one hand, maybe with internal money, or they can get some finance from the banks and institutes. Maybe a last questions that came up here. There was a question if there are benchmarks to regulate resource efficiency in the hospitality industry. Yes, there are some, but to be honest, our main focus is on the manufacturing industry. So hospitality industry is not directly our focus on. But I know from the European Union, there is a guideline that also addresses the hospitality industry regarding resource efficiency. There's another question, how a company can monitor if it is resource efficient or not. I guess that's a very interesting question, because there's not a direct indicator that says, okay, now you're resource efficient. It's depending on the situation within the company. So they have to look on their resource consumption in the first place, and then try to improve it on the best possible way. Sure, there are some benchmarks, so the best techniques that are available, but in the most cases, it's depending on the situations in the production processes in the company itself. There's also a note that resource-efficient technologies are more expensive than others, especially for poor companies. It's difficult to convince them. Now, maybe that's a good starting point to go on the third session, because on the third part of the first webinar, we want to discuss what drivers and barriers are and how they can be overcome. Okay, in this interactive discussion, I just wanted to ask you as participants, what are your experience about implementing resource efficiency in businesses? Maybe next slide. So yeah, here are the main questions for this discussion round. So what do you think that motivates businesses to implement resource efficiency, and what are the barriers for implementation? So I guess we already had one of your remarks that especially the financing of resource efficient technology isn't easy, especially in poor countries, or maybe you have other ideas and experience in your countries. So we would be glad if you share your experience with us. Okay, maybe I just give some of examples for drivers and barriers, and to keep the discussion a little bit rolling. If you go on, please. So maybe one of the drivers that helps to improve resource efficiency or implementing resource efficiency could be the ecological responsible company reputation. Another quite important driver are the cost savings, for sure, and the increasing of the business competitiveness, and also your opinion was that monetary benefits for preventing waste could be an driver. So I guess this benefits for preventing waste is also a part of the cost saving. when we have a look to we go on. So another important driver can be the preparing for resource scarcity. So especially if you have a product that is depending on critical materials, resource efficiency can provide you to improve your independency. Oh, an opinion in the chat box was that the bottom line seems to be that the companies should be motivated, and there's a lack of understanding and awareness. Yes, and there's also from your side that the knowledge and the finance and the lack of leadership are quite important barriers, for example. If we go on for the examples, please. Here also the lack of support from suppliers or clients. This is from my perspective also a very important barrier, because if the market do not ask really for a resource efficient or efficient products, so the producer is hardly to convince producing resource efficient products. Often the price for a product is the most important topic. So, and resource efficient or sustainable products are often more expensive. So I guess there's still a mind shift necessary, that with resource efficient products, on a long term they even can save save money, but also resources. There was another comment in the chat that virgin materials, for example, for plastics or primary materials, are that cheap, so that the recycled or the secondary material are not able to come on the market, and if there are some regulatory measures, how they can be implemented, so these recycled materials or secondary materials. From my perspective, I guess a good idea is to start improving that the technical issues of these materials are as good as the primary materials, and in the cases of the the purchases of the government, they can maybe start asking for recycled or secondary materials in the first place. So then it's also a good ideal to support these secondary materials. If we have a look to some other barriers, which is quite often important, is the investment. It was also your opinion in the chat room. Another barrier for sure could be the uncertain success of a resource efficiency measure, and which is what we'll see after in the next slides from the German perspective, that there is the potential threat that the process is not reliable anymore with the resource efficiency measure, or the product quality couldn't be kept. There's another common experience on developing countries. Which also say that is quite important, or the key is a constant awareness and capacity building by improving the knowledge regarding resource efficiency. And yeah, I guess this is one of the solutions that could be made. Also, from your side, there is the idea for further regulations regarding product regulations. So yeah, I guess there's could also be drivers to spread the idea of resource efficiency a little bit wider. But I guess from the point of the companies, they always try to have less regulations as possible. But you're right. If you set the right regulations, it will be improved resource efficiency. So maybe we go on for now. Because I have some of the findings from our side. This shows the drivers we realized during a study that we asked several companies what for them are the drivers for resource efficiency, and in this survey that has been conducted from the VDI Center for Resource Efficiency, have shown that the most important drivers are the releasing of cost-saving potentials and increasing the overall competitiveness. These are followed by the complying with customer requirements, especially if their customer is, for example, a bigger company or a OEM. So often they require some resource efficient or sustainability requirements. but also the complying with current and future legal requirements is a strong driver. To say it's four of the 8 driving factors can be identified as strong, and both of the top ranking refer directly to the business-oriented thinking and the decision making. So this also again shows how important resource efficiency is becoming in the decision making and the business strategy. We did the same and asked the companies about the barriers. On the next slide. Next, please. There are 6 of 10 aspects that can be identified as strong barriers. In particular, these aspects are or the most important that have been indicated by the companies is that the amount of necessary investment is often high, and as I mentioned also before, that the process wouldn't be reliable, and the product quality is not is not in the same state. So they have the threat of the process reliability and the product quality that they consider as very important. It's also not a surprise that the survey showed that most of these aspects are economic for dominating barriers. Next, please. Finally, I want to give some ideas or a few notes how barriers can be overcome. On the one hand, you have to ask yourself what kind of barriers are encountered. So some of the barriers can be related to the behaviors of employees. What you also mentioned that it's not already the right mindset about resource efficiency, but this also includes the management. So the management has to show the will implementing resource efficiency into their businesses. On the other hand, there are technical barriers, for example, on the level of the product design or the process optimization. So if you have some constraints on the product improvement because of the special material that used, you have to analyze how these barriers can be overcome. But these barriers depend strongly on the specific processes in the companies and also the possibilities for improvement, and depend on the available information and the know-how for the optimization for the improvement. Next slide, please. In order to reduce these barriers, especially for the decision makers in the company, the success of a measure should be clearly shown, and also the implementation should be as transparent as possible. So if in a company the project leader asked to find a solution, it's necessary to find a positive example for that has been already implemented this technology, but it has to be a specific one and a special solution that meets the requirements of the company. So finally, some more recommendation for a successful resource efficiency project in companies. So the head of the resource efficiency project or the leader should build up some kind of position of trust, so that both the management and the employees will understand and trust him, that this project will lead to improvement. This will help to convince the management, especially, but also the employees that have to follow the idea afterwards. Further on, it's quite important to show the competitive situation in the company, and this should be made visible. And as far as possible, the reduction or the positive influence of resource efficiency on the total costs should be shown and made transparent. And what is also quite important, that all relevant stakeholders in the companies or actors in the companies should be on board regarding this relevant informations. This can be the middle management, as well as the works council and the on-site teams. So this was from my side the first webinar, but I see there are still quite huge discussions. So maybe we still have the time to discuss some of your comments. There was a question if taxation on the resource efficiency and ecological responsibility could be an realistic driver or regulation to encourage this for more resource efficiency. Well, I guess that's a good question. In some cases, it might be a chance, but often regulations are limiting some ideas. But from my perspective, you're right that some regulations will be necessary. Otherwise, the industry won't move. But from our perspective as the VDI Center for Resource Efficiency, we always try to encourage companies and show good practice examples. But at least some of the results have to be rolled out through regulations. Are there other companies, other comments or ideas you want to share, or other questions? If not, next slide, please. Oh, now I see that there are quite lots of questions on barriers for developing countries. Okay. Well, I just quickly went through the question. So yeah, there were some notes about the barriers in developing countries, especially on the lack of knowledge and the problems of financing. What I can offer, so I go through all the questions that have been come up, and we try to share some of the answers and ideas afterwards. But well, from my side, was this the first webinar of the training series? I want to thank you very much for your attention and your contributions, a lot of contributions. And I hope we see each other next week. So in the next week sessions, we will have a detailed look into how can companies make their way to the improved resource efficiency. So this will be a kind of roadmap how to implement, especially in small and medium enterprises, resource efficiency. That's is in the first place analyzing their own situation, and then developing solutions and ideas what can be implemented. And we want to discuss more in detail what are the role of the employees in this implementation process, and how they can be involved and motivated for this whole idea of improving resource efficiency in the companies. Thanks a lot again, and hope we see it. You will join next week. It's also 3 o'clock next week on Wednesday. Thanks a lot for your attention. Goodbye.